Every major investigation has a moment. The experienced detective looks at the evidence, looks at their notes, and then thinks to himself, this case is not what everyone thinks it is. Today we're bringing in someone who had that moment with the Nancy Guthrie case, Morgan Wright, former state trooper, former detective, technical advisor to America's Most Wanted, and one of the most innovative, investigative minds in law enforcement today. When Morgan looked at the Guthrie case, he didn't just rehabilitate the existing narrative, he demolished it. And what he found will change the way you think about this case. This is Heroes Behind the Badge. When you studied the Nancy Guthrie disappearance, and I'll call it disappearance, because I'm not sure what it is, but it is a disappearance, okay? Did you have that moment of truth, and what triggered that?
So to kind of frame this up correctly about the way I approached it, look, I'm a huge fan of Elon Musk. One, because he's really, really rich, which means he's really, really smart,
Yeah.
when you build all that stuff. But I was listening to one particular episode, this is years ago, and he was talking about how he built batteries. And the way he built batteries, he said, how, the way you did it cheaper, he says, what are batteries composed of? Nickel, cadmium, lithium ion. He broke it down. He said, I can go buy those on the market at spot price. But it was the process of rebuilding it from the ground up. So I got to thinking, you know what we're missing really in law enforcement? Because I was a state trooper, I was a detective, I did stuff in the justice and intel space. But what we're missing, there's a lot of good things out there, but it's like when a new technology comes along, like DNA, we have to figure it out. Biometrics, we have to figure it out. Drones, we have to figure it out. So I said, but something that really hasn't been refreshed in a long time is investigative methodology. So I started applying what I called first principles. So the way I looked at the Guthrie case is the way I would look at, you and I were just talking beforehand, Dennis. It's like, if you want it, you can either rehabilitate a house or you can remodel a house. Rehabilitating a house, you go in, you paint the walls. Okay, it looks good, right? And that's what happens with narratives. You take a narrative and hey, let's rehabilitate the narrative, make it fit our view of the case.
Right.
What I instead do is it's like if you watch those things on HD TV or when they come in and they remodel a house, but it's demo day. They tear out the walls, they tear out everything. You tear out everything down to the structure. You fix all the structural problems, and then you rebuild from the ground up. So that's what I do on cases. So with Guthrie, I think what separated me from the other folks is I don't go in for narratives. I don't go in for speculation. I don't go in for theories.
Sure.
When I looked at the Guthrie case, I said either it's a burglary that went wrong or it was never a burglary. It can't be both. And so what you do is you create your hypothesis for each case, and then you stress test it to the point of failure. And the more that you start, because look, I've investigated enough burglaries. You say if somebody's going to burgle a house, what are the signals of a burglary? What's the signals of theft, right? Are they moving around things, or is it a staged crime scene? Is it a abduction designed to look like a burglary? And then you have factors that make it look like that. So in the Guthrie case, here's what you would have to believe in the Guthrie case for all the people say, well, it was a burglary that went wrong. So if it was a burglary that went wrong, you have somebody whose mindset is, I'm in here to take something. They have an encounter with the victim. And then in that short time frame, which we know it's from 2:12 when one of the sensors went off inside the house, one of the cameras, to 2:28 when is the last ping from her pacemaker to her phone.
Right.
In 16 minutes, somebody whose sole intention was to burgle a house now becomes somebody who's decided abduction is less risky than fleeing. And so they have to arrange transportation. They have to arrange logistics. You have to arrange control. So when you do an abduction, there's three things you have to look at. You have to look at entry. Was it forced or consensual? Then you have to look at control. What's your mechanism for control of the target? And then what's your method for egress, exfiltration? So when I looked at it, I said, I'm not saying it's one or the other, but I'm saying, but if you stress test it and collapse it, the whole thing about it was a burglary that gone wrong doesn't survive in a lot of the stress tests because it's not the same indication as opposed to a targeted abduction. And you can tell by where the blood trail goes. But to me, it's that very short time window from where we know that there was motion inside the house. Look, burglars, and look, having investigated enough of them in your audience, they know too. It's about get in, get your stuff, get out, get off the X. The longer you're in a house, the higher the risk goes, right? You want to get in, you want to get out. But when you're doing a targeted abduction, if you've done your reconnaissance, if you know like patterns of life, you're more comfortable sitting around. That's why when you look at the video of when they recovered the video, the behavior of that person was comfortable where they were at. I
Yeah.
mean, and
Appeared to
you
be,
look at
yeah.
you look at their trade craft. A lot. See, here's the other thing too. People made a mistake on, Dennis. Everybody said, "Well, this is an amateur." Now, I tell you, I was in Tucson. I talked to people that were on Tucson PD and the sheriff's office and DPS, and I've talked to people on ATF and marshals. It's called the Mexican carry. And second of all, people got it all wrong because they said it's a white holster. No, that's infrared. People even didn't understand the technology of how
Yeah.
infrared works, so they got the
Yeah.
colors all wrong. But this guy was relaxed. He was not in a hurry, and you can tell that because 147 to 228, 47 minutes. Is that so? I'd simply ask, is that typical behavior of a burglar who's looking to steal something and get out?
Probably not. Yeah, probably.
No, and I think it's pretty evident, especially if you really think it out and if you have any law enforcement background. Just like you said, Morgan, you're in and out, you just want to grab something, you're a thief, basically, right? But all of a sudden, if you're a thief and you decide, uh-oh, I ran into this woman, now I'm going to abduct her, well, where are you going to put her? You haven't thought it through already. You got to go home
Really?
and live somewhere where other people are around. You haven't had any kind of pre-thought, plan. So I agree with you 100% on that.
Yeah.
But so Morgan, okay, so we're ruling out burglary, it sounds like, after you've gone through this whole process. So where in your mind are we today? What kind of crime was it? Are we ever going to solve this crime? I mean, couldn't Nancy Guthrie still be alive? I mean, where is your head right now?
So I told you I was going to bring a couple props. For answer to that question, I have to thank Craig. So I did some fundraising for you guys on the Ride and Run to Remember. So this is something I've kept with me always.
Look at that.
And then
That's
I got
awesome.
this from you too, Craig.
Oh,
Wow.
yes. Yeah. Commemorative coin. The whole
Well,
collection.
Very.
And I do that because right back here, and you know what this is? This is one of my
Yes.
best friends. I was there when his name was read out on the
yeah.
wall. So everything you do, I just want you to know everything you do is personal for me, and I'm honored for you to consider you a friend and for you to have me on this. So
That's great.
now
Thank
that
you
I've
for
got my
that.
props out of the way, let me get to your question.
Thank
So
you.
here's what I think. I think all of these folks are looking at it incorrectly because once you get wedded to a narrative, then the narrative becomes canonical. It becomes sacred. You can't,
Yes.
And so as an investigator, then you're less likely to dispute the narrative because it goes against what everybody else has put out there. So Craig, to your point, where I think we are, when I look through that model and I say, is it a burglary gone wrong or was it never a burglary? I find very few things to show that it's a burglary gone wrong. And back what you were saying about, like burglars want to get off the X. So I think at some point later, we will find this was more of a targeted abduction than everything, because like you said, where's your car at? So if you're going to do an abduction, you have to arrange for a car. You have to arrange for transportation. We know there was a car. How do we know that? Because the blood droplets stop at the end of the driveway. And so there was a car there. Now, one of the cool things we did, a friend of mine, this ties into everything about what I think happened, but a friend of mine, him and I both testified before Congress back in 2013 on healthcare.gov, safety and security of big government systems. He's an NSA hacker, Marine, bright guy. But I was flying to Tucson actually for Fox News to go on scene for a while, and we were going back and forth, actually over Starlink. First time I flew on an aircraft with Starlink, it was like amazing, the speed.
Really? Oh, okay.
But we got to talking about, what a Bluetooth is? Bluetooth is nothing more than a transmitter
Right.
transmitter with a unique idea signal. So we were going back and forth. He started already while I was in the flight. He was writing code for how to detect this Bluetooth, but the FBI now had developed some rudimentary stuff, but Dave's stuff actually improved what they had, but they were doing it in a helicopter. So the reason I say that, Craig, is I know everybody was out there saying, hey, look, well, she could still be alive. She's this. I was the one saying the part out loud that nobody wanted to say. I said, at some point, you got to start treating this as a no-body homicide. You have to change your investigative mindset. Are we looking for a clandestine gravesite? Which that's tough in those hills there. You can't not dig in that area. It's baked. Are we looking for a open gravesite, a body dump? Or are we looking for a concealed gravesite, maybe somewhere inside a building? Wow. And I simply said, if people thought she was alive and that was their operating theory, then why is the FBI up in a helicopter looking for a ping from a Bluetooth device? Because they understand too is that you can't take anything off the table. You can't get wedded to a narrative. So I kind of bring all of that to say this, Craig, is I looked at all the egress routes. I did a whole analysis of how you get out of there. That area is like a bowl of spaghetti. If you turn a bowl of spaghetti upside down the roads, there is no rhyme or reason.
Right.
So somebody had to have local knowledge or at least some kind of a navigation app. Well, if you have a navigation app, chances are there may be a signal that we could collect. But if I were investigating the case, it's like I would treat it as a no-body homicide. That's the way I would investigate it. And I would look at what are the possible egress routes out of there. I know a lot of people said, hey, they could have gone across the border. Maybe. But to your point, I think we were making earlier, she's 84 years. So here's my final kind of capstone point. Everybody says, well, we want to hold out hope. Well, I'm a realist, right? It's like if I'm investigating, hope is not a strategy. Hope is an outcome, but it's not a strategy. So you have an 84-year-old woman who is confronted at 2 o'clock in the morning, who has a pacemaker. There's obviously a violent confrontation because there's blood, whether she was on Coumadin and was easy to, doesn't matter. You had some kind of violence because you had control. So the chances of a 30-year-old surviving for 14 days, they could do it. They'd be pretty weak at that. The chance of an 84 cardiac compromised woman who was attacked basically or confronted in the middle of the night in her own home by herself, I would question whether or not she was able to survive the drive out of there.
Yeah. So that kind of answers the question. This case is not what everyone thinks it is. You've kind of flipped the script and saying, no, my narrative would be a lot different than what the common narrative is out there. And that's what good investigators do, right? You flip the script.
Well, they do, but you know what happens too? But even some investigators, they fall victim to certain things. In other words, it's like Craig and I are investigating a case, and he comes to me and he says, "Hey, here's what I've got," and there's already a narrative, and I accept his narrative, and then the district attorney accepts that narrative, and you build upon that. But what happens if it's wrong, right? There's two things. Either the premise of the case is wrong, right, or we've got the wrong premise to begin with. And that's why I call them hypotheses. Right. If you have a hypothesis and you're testing that, you know something's going to fail. In fact, you want it to fail. I want one of these two models to fail. Either it's the model of a burglary gone wrong or it was never a burglary. Yeah. I want one of those to fail so I can collapse this binary model down to an investigative path forward. So, yeah, you know, and the other thing too is I think the problem with narratives, again, it's like we get locked in on them, and then, well, Craig, I know you were in the DC region. I was. If I said
white van,
white there, right there, you said it. White. Everybody's looking for a white van, and I told the FBI all the data we needed to solve. You already had, and guess what they did? A Malvo and Muhammad had their plates run 13 times in 33 days by law enforcement. Their tag was in the system 4 times.
We're talking about the Beltway sniper.
The Beltway sniper, right?
Beltway sniper.
Yeah, we've
killed
done
10 people in this area.
Yeah, we've done a podcast on it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I got the data behind it. I did the presentation. I went out to FBI and I said, look, you got all the data, because I was doing stuff on serial killers about low-level contacts and looking at what's called NCIC offline. So, but 4 times a dark-colored or burgundy-colored Caprice was seen leaving the scene of one of those shootings. And guess what? It's the only vehicle in the United States whose plate was run in the National Capital Region and in Alabama. And how do we tie those two together? Because ballistics tied the shootings in the National Capital Region to the one in Alabama, Montgomery. Yeah. That's where people got it confused. They thought they were talking about Montgomery County, as opposed to Montgomery, Alabama. Yeah, so that's my point. So when you get locked in, what was everybody looking for? Every time a shooting happened, we were shutting it down looking for a white panel van.
Yeah. So is there something, Morgan, in your experience and with your expertise, is there something hiding here in plain sight, as in so many cases? Because kind of what you're saying is, hey, look over here, and we should be looking over here. Is there something hiding in plain sight here?
Yeah, there probably is. And one of the things I did is I do a lot of work. A friend of mine owns a company called Fog Data, and they do a lot of work with what's called ad tech. So you have 2 things: cell site location information. That's where the ping's off the cell phone. But those require subpoenas to each individual carrier. Then you have to aggregate it. Ad tech is different. That's based on the app on your phone. It doesn't matter your carrier, doesn't matter what model you have, because those apps now centralize the collection of data. And that data is something that's sold. You agree to it when you download your app. So everything I'm talking about here is perfectly legal. So I think that there are some patterns of movement. And here's the reason I say that. I was telling somebody, if you think about what some of these gangs do, or even people who have at least some modicum of tradecraft, they actually follow the same thing the terrorist planning cycle does. When you commit a terrorist act, you do things like broad target selection, initial reconnaissance, final target selection, rehearsals, and final reconnaissance, actions on the objective, escape and evasion. I mean, that's human behavior. So what I'm saying, Dennis, is we need to look at what human behavior does. How would somebody leave that area?
Yes.
And what we need to do is focus on what are the most likely areas they left, focus a signals analysis on all of those areas, because I think it's out there somewhere. But, criminals have gotten smarter. The damage CSI did for collecting DNA in evidence cases, well, because they told them just pour bleach on stuff or get rid of it.
Yeah, they showed them, yeah.
Yeah, but what's the expectation? The expectation is you can run DNA and have it back in 44 minutes. Why? Because that's the amount of time a 1-hour show on TV gets at 16 minutes of commercials. So
right.
all DNA comes back in 44 minutes.
Right.
Morgan, one of the things that interests me is that most of these kind of cases are solved in the first few days. And if they go cold, it's much less likely that we're going to get a good outcome anytime soon. In the early days of this investigation, we saw Sheriff Chris Nanos, Pima County Sheriff down there in Arizona. He seemed to take the lead. His agency took the lead. Then the FBI came in. Look back at those early days. Were there mistakes made, or do you think this crime was just done so well that we may never have a good outcome?
So I don't want to disparage any agency, but I will say, let me put it to you this way: it's not unusual for an agency to maintain the lead on something when there's not a federal nexus, if there's not a federal predicate. But
Right.
the FBI comes in and helps on a lot of things. Now, technically, if it's kidnapping, would the FBI have jurisdiction to the extent that it violates the Hobbs Act or goes across state lines, and you're so close to the border? But I think the appropriate relationship was the sheriff's office takes the lead. I would have taken more advantage of the FBI early on, only for the reason because Nancy Guthrie, this was going to be a national case. Everybody knew it because of Savannah Guthrie. This was going to get the attention that it obviously did. And so what you want to do is take advantage of the resources. Look, a friend of mine, Michael Miller, chief of police down there in Texas, where they had the shooting at the synagogue. HRT, he said he was so impressed. FBI flew out HRT. These folks, they had a standoff. But look, I've worked with the Bureau enough too. When they roll, they've got the toys. I mean, they're somebody who brings some serious toys to the game, right? And so I would have done that. I think, just me personally, I would have done that earlier. But the other strategy I would have taken, here's the other thing that happens, and it gets to the narrative we were talking about. When you don't hold any kind of a regular touch point with the press, you have to feed the beast, and reporters will start. I can't tell you how many times I was reached out to by local reporters just looking for some new angle because there wasn't, and I'm not knocking it. That's his style. He can certainly do that. Just for me, the way I would have done it, even if you didn't have enough to report, I would have at least had somebody, a public face out there, a PIO, so that people come and talk to them and say, hey, look, here's what we're doing. Here's the update. And as people know, you reach a point to where the case peaks, and I could tell too when I was out there by looking at the amount of media that was there just lining the road. I actually drove the house because I wanted to at least say I've been there. I saw the scene. I talked to the deputy guarding the house. I checked the area. Well, the other thing too, here's the other thing that got me. You're talking about mistakes. I think when the New York Post was following the FBI when they found the glove on the side of the road. Oh my God, it's the glove. And everybody, well, but let me tell you, I was on, I think it was News Nation with Elizabeth Vargas. Elizabeth and I were actually designed to be on the second generation of America's Most Wanted together, and COVID hit. So that kind of went, but we were talking, but I said something and she repeated it. I said that glove means absolutely nothing until it's tied to the crime scene. Otherwise, it's just a data point. And what did we find out? Has nothing to do with it. They ran the DNA as a restaurant worker. But yet we exhausted so much cognitive energy and so much press and focus But that's the role of a PIO to say, hey, look, guys, tone it down. This is nothing but a data point. But I tell you now, there is one constructive criticism I would give in this whole thing. If you're a first responder, if you're a searcher and you're out there, for God's sakes, take everything out that you brought in with you. Do not discard gloves, cigarette butts, gum wrappers. Quit doing that. You know why? Because everybody thinks, oh, that could be potential evidence. So that would be my only constructive criticism. It's like camping. When you go camping and you're in a national forest, you clean up your campsite. You pack everything out, including your trash. So, but structurally. Well, one more point here, real quick. Here's the biggest mistake, though. We only know what we know. A lot of people are making too many assumptions when you don't have regular contact, and they're trying to infer what law enforcement knows, and they're getting it all wrong. We don't know what's inside the house. We know that there's mixed DNA, but that's the other thing. There's a whole big chunk of this missing. It's like a DNA strand that they did on Jurassic Park, and they filled it in, and we saw what happened there. Dinosaurs went wild. So you got to be careful about filling in that DNA strand.
Yeah.
Well, when one of the criticisms early on was that they opened up the crime scene too early, and investigators kept going back into the house, kept looking for more evidence in the surrounding area, and perhaps some of the evidence might have been lost because they opened up the crime scene too soon. Reporters, curious onlookers, started going to the house, looking at the blood on the porch and in the driveway. What's your thought on that?
So here's a bit of forensic trivia. How many people know what Locard's exchange principle is?
Billy knows. Billy, raise your hand.
Here you go. Trivia for $200. Locard was actually a forensic scientist. I think he was French, but Locard's exchange principle that says anytime you come in contact with something, you leave something and you take something with you. Oh. So this is why you control crime scenes. And to your point, Craig, actually, that's another constructive criticism. It's like the military. Once you don't want to fight for the same ground twice. And if they develop a suspect, what have you automatically started building in? Reasonable doubt. Because you can say that evidence wasn't there. That's not him. That was introduced. That's why you have to be so careful with touch DNA. I shake hands with you, Craig. I get what's called touch DNA epithelial cell. I go and I pull a door open. I've just put your DNA on a door in a building you've never been in, but yet now I've put you at the crime scene. Yeah. So people leap to that conclusion, right? So yeah, you're right. I think I would have. Here's the other thing. As much money is going to be spent on this case and time and attention, simply stationing a deputy there and keeping the crime scene locked down until you were sure. I understand budgets. You got to be careful about how you do stuff, but I also understand that if you don't keep that crime scene secure, the cost to come back in and then do all these other things to account for it will far exceed the cost of stationing a single deputy out front. I worked crime scenes to where we had to station somebody. We had a gang-related murder. It was actually a dope deal gone bad. A guy got run over with his own car, left in the middle of a field. We didn't find it till almost 5:30 or 6 o'clock at night. So we had to secure that area until daylight the next day because there was no way to go into that crime scene and be effective at searching it. So sometimes you just have to secure the scene and hold it. But I go back to what I said earlier, Craig. It is such a national case with national visibility. I would have gone the extra mile because guess what? Every potential defense attorney, if they find a suspect, and I hope they do, every defense attorney is going to be, the biggest mistake they made in the OJ case when it came to DNA, when they were showing their videos, and I remember this, and they were showing how they collected videos. One of the demonstrations where they're showing actually, and I remember seeing this lady, blonde, I think a ponytail, glasses, she was showing how they got swabs off the concrete. She bent down, she touched her fingers on the concrete just to balance herself, and then took a swab. And the defense attorneys pounced on that because they said, you just touched the ground with your gloves, but those gloves are supposed to be sterile. Now, what other DNA have you introduced into this that wasn't there to begin with? Wow. This is what's going to happen when you don't control the scene. Defense attorneys are going to pick this apart and have a field day. And guess what? They get the luxury of being a Monday morning quarterback. They can sit back and judge everything that you did. But again, Craig, I agree with you. Like I said, I know, my heart still bleeds. I'm still a cop. I bleed blue. So I hate to say, but if I could offer constructive improvements for people in the future, if you have a high profile case, lock the scene down early. Don't let anybody in. And there's nothing wrong with staying too long at a crime scene. Especially if you've got consent to search and keeping that thing locked down.
So I just want to chime in now because I think that ultimately we're all going to be surprised in the end. I think something is going to surprise every one of us that maybe we didn't think about.
You know, Bill's right. And in part 2, Morgan Wright goes even deeper, not just on the Guthrie case, but on the investigative technology that could solve cases like this one for good. We're talking about a platform that found a 6-month fugitive in just 36 hours, artificial intelligence that gives one detective the output of 10, and a way for you as a citizen to help solve cold cases without ever leaving your home. And if you want to support the men and women of law enforcement, visit citizensbehindthebadge.org. This is Heroes Behind the Badge.